I'm Terry Murphy for the Women's Wisdom Network, senior editor for Realty Times, Women in Business, Women in Real Estate, and In the Men's Room with Murph. We always like to have healthy men in the men's room, and that's what we have today. Chris Johnson is the founder and CEO of On Target Living, the power of feeling your best. He's an author, he's an international speaker, he's a celebrity on all things health, and he's here to join us today to talk about what we can do to have some more energy and better health. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
My pleasure, Terry.
Well, Chris and I got to meet each other at Mortgage Girlfriends. Cindy Garza was the host in Chicago a few weeks ago. Actually, it's just a few weeks ago, isn't it? It seems like forever. And Cindy always brings us great information. And one of the things I really was impressed with was your information, your unconscious competence with all things nutritional. And we know that doctors today don't get any nutritional training hardly at all. And there you are as a virtual encyclopedia on all things health. As the author of Create Laser Focus, Boundless Energy, and Unstoppable Drive in Any Organization, you've got that book out. That was out a couple of years ago. And now you've got coming out the new book, Rest, Eat, Move. And that's going to be a brand new opportunity in February of 2022. What would you tell people, especially women in business, about feeling your best? Because it's hard today. There's lots of confusion.
Well, I think the biggest thing, Terry, is that people have to look at their health, and the health begins in the mind, but really stepping back and realizing that your greatest asset is your health. That's foundational. That's from an energy standpoint, understanding sleep. And I think during the pandemic, I think many people started to realize when you don't have your health, you don't have a whole lot. And so I actually started writing the book before the pandemic, but it was just ironic that during the pandemic, I'm talking about all these different things such as sleeping and breathing. So that's really the main gist of the book, is how you rest. Do you have enough space in your life, understanding stress? And then we get into the eating piece and understanding gut health and the immune system. And then last but not least, we talk about movement. And there's a few other things like know your numbers and things along that lines. But I think that's where people have to step back and really, analyze, do I really pay attention to my greatest asset, and that's their health? And so hopefully this is a wake-up call for that.
Well, I got to tell you, we all think about stress, and I just did a podcast myself for women on stress, and it's sort of a badge of honor, to be able to juggle all of these things. Women particularly have multiple roles when they're mothers and business people and wives and sisters, the drill. And the fact is that when you really study the organics of stress and the whole molecular impact it has on your body, constant stress can not only just impair your health, it can kill you. I mean, it's not a pleasant way to suffer.
Well, I think, in my new book, I have a couple of chapters on stress, because I don't think most people realize that stress, there's no such thing as good and bad stress. But when the human body feels threatened in any way, shape, or form, the body's going to slowly break down. And again, the diseases of today are much deadlier than they were 100 years ago, is because the diseases of today are the diseases of worry. So when people feel threatened, can't pay your mortgage, what's going on in my world, relationships, it doesn't really matter. If you feel threatened, the body's going to react from a stress standpoint. And when the body reacts from a fearful, stressful, impactful way, you're going to have problems with overall health, including gut health, which leads to a compromised immune system. So I think more and more people are starting to realize the importance of getting enough rest, rejuvenation, and allowing the body to recover. And if you don't do that, then you slowly break the body down. And that's what we're seeing. About 80 to 90% of all diseases we're facing in the United States today or around the world is based on stress. So it's a big deal. Mental health has never been worse. But as a society, we need to start learning some of these skills. And then, as you mentioned, the belief that for me to be my best, feel my best, I have to have adequate enough rest in my world.
Well, I know you have a whole podcast on sleep. You've got a phenomenal podcast library as well. What about weight gain and cortisol and stress? Let's just use women as an example, because we have a higher propensity for body fat.
Yeah, so if the stress hormones are on, cortisol, adrenaline, aldosterone, we're designed, the human body is incredible to handle acute stress, but we're not designed to handle chronic stress. And so if we feel threatened in any shape or form, the stress hormones they're going to be stimulated. And then your building or your sex hormones, or I call them the lean hormones, will be compromised. So growth hormone, testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, all of those hormones are going to be compromised. So number one, we're seeing lots of hormonal imbalances. And number two, when you talk about weight gain, is the body working for you or is it working against you? So it's not always about a calorie in versus a calorie out. It's really understanding the whole picture. And a big part of that is understanding stress and hormones and how it affects your body fat. And if you're not sleeping, it's a great opportunity for the body to gain weight because now you stimulate a hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin is the hormone that makes you want to overeat. So again, there's a lot of facets of hormones and stress and how the body reacts to that, including gaining weight.
Well, tell us a little bit about the new book, Rest, Eat, Move. It sounds to me like sleep seems to be the cornerstone of what you're talking about here. And we know chronically people get less than 7 hours.
Yeah, so when you think about what we do at On Target Living, we really try to educate individuals, groups, or corporations of how do you create, when people feel their best, they are their best. And a big part of that is not just always, eating healthy or moving more, it's really putting it all together. And we begin the foundational pillar of the health begins in the mind. So it all begins with behavior because many people know they should be doing something, but why don't they? So the book begins with the first 6 chapters on really behavior change. And then from there, I kind of weave in, now here comes the rest, the stress, the power of the breath. Again, breathing, most adults do not breathe through their nose. They breathe too quickly and they breathe through their chest. So again, we talk about breathing, sleeping, and then the big one is space. I'm so excited to launch this pillar on about space. And really what space is, we do not have enough space in our lives today. And then we move into the eating piece, and then the last one's into the movement. So that's really the big pillars. And it's a guide. It's 385 pages, but I wanted to really dive into the weeds and really help people understand what's behind the curtain, and then what simple steps they could take along the way to be their best.
Could you just define space a little bit more? And when you say space, I'm thinking I went to quiet time, less distractions. It seems like since we've had the preponderance of social media and marketing and messaging coming to us 24/7, is that what you're referring to with regards to space?
Yeah, Terry, that's exactly what I'm referring to. If you go back in time, in 1940, we had lots of white space, I call it, where relationships, and this is where we're all going to talk about the end of our lives. But when we started losing space, in spaces where memories are made, really it's all the good stuff. It's what we all will talk about the end of our lives. But I see more and more people, we've done over 450 webinars since the pandemic hit. People just don't have enough space in their life anymore. They're overscheduled. There's so much social, there's this, that, there's no stillness. Again, if I don't have the space, I'm probably not going to be sleeping well. My breathing is going to be not right. Again, I feel stressed. So we all know when we look at our calendar and the next day we don't have a whole lot going on, it's incredible how we feel. And so for many people, I really look at their world and say, okay, number one, we got to step back for a second. Before we tackle the breathing, before we tackle the sleeping, we got to look at your world and what you got to carve out some time. And again, if you don't have any stillness, you're probably not going to have a healthy mind and a healthy body. So I really hit them in the head. Do you shut the door to the end of the day? Many people don't. There's no delineation from work and their life. And it's a wake-up call. And so again, this is what I see more and more with executives and organizations. There's no space. And so I spent a lot of time talking about space and why we need more space in our lives. And when we do have space, we all feel pretty good about that, including myself. So I think the pandemic really was a gift to me. When I couldn't fly, I realized I didn't have a lot of space in my life. So that's when I started realizing, okay, I'm talking about it, but I'm not having it. And when I have more space, how do I feel? And then we started talking more about that with our clients. And that kind of, you saw that firsthand when you were at that conference with Cindy. I spent a lot of time talking about space.
You did, and it was such a brilliant presentation. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you as a guest on Realty Times, because I think the messaging goes far beyond this interview. And if you've got 385 pages in that guide, I bet we could plug in a couple of great ideas. Before we close today, do you have one, I don't want to call it a mantra, but one basic tip that these people that are listening are lucky enough to listen to? What would you tell them?
Well, I think the big thing is that there's so much information out there, but really, intentionally, what one new thing do you want to change? So if you're trying to lower your blood pressure, or maybe you're trying to have better energy or get a better night's sleep or whatever it is, what one thing? Because when people get overwhelmed, they don't do anything. They get paralyzed. And so really our message is, how do you take one step at a time? And that's really where I want your listeners, your viewers, to really step back and say, okay, am I really drinking enough water? If I'm not, do I have that blind spot? That's where I begin. If my sleep is not where I want it to be, what do I need to do to change my environment? Do I really, do I value my sleep? Do I pay attention to it? So I think that's the big takeaway today is, what one thing, how do you build that new, that new behavior into a habit? And I think that's where we've seen success with people over time is, taking these baby steps that lead into long-term habits.
Well, clearly, besides subscribing to your podcast series, tell us the best way to get more of Chris Johnson.
Well, I think the easiest way is to go engage us on our website, which is just on targetliving.com. We have a fantastic team. We have many resources, books, podcasts, videos. We do private training. We do corporate training. And as you saw, we do professional speaking. We travel all over the world speaking. So there's a lot of ways to engage us. And we have a fantastic team. There's 9 of us, and we try to be very accessible. So lots of ways to engage. Podcast is easy. Videos are easy. Email is easy. And actually, you can pick up the phone and call us, which you're going to get somebody at the end of the line, which we're really proud of that. So lots of ways to engage, and we're here to help people feel their best.
We're excited for your new book to come out. We're excited to have you join us again. That's Chris Johnson. That's O-N, because I know there's a bunch of E-N. So we want to make sure it's Chris Johnson with an O-N. On Target Living, the best way to reach you, especially if you're looking for a good presentation to your corporation, or great keynote, which is what you did for Cindy and Mortgage Girlfriends, which we appreciate. Chris, I sure hope you'll join us again soon. We're definitely going to follow up after the first of the year on that new book. I'm going to be first in line to buy one as well. Thanks for joining us here at Realty Times, Women in Business, Women in Real Estate, in the men's room with Murph. I know Chris is going to join us again for another segment coming up soon. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me.